Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blue channel. I'm Josh Williams and I'm joined by David Hughes. Dave, not so good this week, mate.
Yeah, a little bit under the weather, mate. I'm going to smile through it though, but yeah, just I don't know. This is a very cliche kind of British line, but it does feel like it's been going around. I know a few people who've been in the same boat. Have you managed to escape it so far?
Yeah, I've been okay so far, but at least it gives us a reason to give a bit of a different update than our usual. Yeah, Everton's great type line.
Hmm.
But Everton is great on the Liverpool scene.
Yeah.
Feels like we've been away for quite a bit, but I'm not sure we have. But Liverpool are now back in a title race by the looks of it.
After
Surprisingly,
we specifically said after Christmas, the title race is done.
yeah. Well, it did seem over. I'll be honest, and still might be, but I hope it's not. I hope I'm wrong in this case. Um, yeah, Liverpool are 3 points away from Manchester City now, and obviously have to face them at the Etihad. So we will get to that. We also have to talk about obviously this weekend's Carabao Cup final, most important trophy out there, and we've got to talk about briefly first the 6-0 win over Leeds. Not going to go into too much detail, but I thought it was a very strong performance. And I think Liverpool basically showed how to play against Leeds, mate. We obviously know Marcel Bielsa is an advocate of man marking. Very unique approach that isn't particularly common throughout Europe. I think the only team that comes to mind when I think of man marking sides is Atalanta. Can't think of any others. I'm not sure about you.
No, they did Leeds, Atalanta. Yeah, no one else really stands out. Certainly to that extent, anyway.
Yeah, but yeah, Liverpool, in my opinion, showed yet again how you've got to play to exploit that.
Yeah. I mean, really dominant win. Kind of, if you would have been asked how to preview it, it would have really played out how you expected. Typical Leeds, really. I'll be honest, I'm not really a fan of any extreme of any particular style, if that makes sense. Like, I think there's a reason why you don't do full end of the spectrum type thing, and Leeds seem to do this with the man marking, but I think man marking is just too flawed. I think even from a set piece perspective, it's too flawed, which is why so many teams don't do it anymore. Certainly at an elite level, you might see a hybrid version of like some man marking with zonal, but predominantly teams have a heavy focus on zonal rather than man marking, and there's a reason why that's done in outfield as well, because it's just too easily bypassed, especially if you have better individuals in terms of the 11v11, which, let's be honest, it's not biased to say that that's the case with Liverpool, isn't it? They've got better players all over the pitch, and if you've got certain individuals who can overcome their 1v1 battles, then suddenly that just causes big headaches everywhere else on the pitch, because then other players have got to decide, do they close that man who's broke free down, potentially leaving the man there marking? Do they stay and leave that man in space to basically punish you? It just causes too many headaches, in my opinion, Josh.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when it comes to how rare it is as a system, that is kind of why, because it's kind of not that great, and it can go wrong. It can
Yeah.
really go wrong, and it's relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but it's 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 not that difficult to exploit if you're the better team, if you've got better players, essentially. And it does pose the question, what how Marcelo Bielsa would get on in charge of a team like Liverpool, for example, because he's always been in charge of, like, Chile, Bilbao, um, Marseille, I think, Leeds, teams that, and you could argue the season where he was kind of in charge of the dominant group of players when Leeds were in the Championship, and
Hmm.
he ran away with it, really.
Hmm.
So it is one of them that I've always considered, but when it comes to facing a stronger group of players, man marking does make it very much about an individual battles game as opposed to a team game. If you win your individual battles, we will win the match. But it's very difficult to win your individual battles when you're coming up against Mo Salah, Thiago, Fabinho, Virgil van Dijk, you're going to struggle. And I think Liverpool really showcased exactly what you've got to do to cause this man-marking scheme problems. One of the things I noticed was Liverpool's positional interchanging was really, really fluid. Even more fluid than usual. Like sometimes Luis Diaz would end up on the right, sometimes Trent would end up in centre midfield, sometimes Mane would end up as a number 6. It was real positional interchanging, and as I said, when you're conducting a man marking approach, that makes it trickier for Leeds because there's players popping up everywhere. You don't really have a designated man. And Sadio Mane played through the middle as kind of Liverpool's version of Firmino, and he did play very like Firmino. He was retreating very, very deep at times and taking a centre half with him. And as a result of that, gaps open up and you can get in and exploit them. So it's typical false nine stuff, really. But when it's man marking systems, it's definitely going to work because the centre half's going to follow you.
Yeah. And, I imagine maybe pre-game or through the week when the planning for the fixture, there probably is elements of saying, well, this is how Liverpool line up. So Diaz, for example, Diaz is going to play on the left. So obviously he's your man if you're the right back or if you're in that area. But those kind of rotations do make that really difficult because then suddenly players have got to kind of problem solve on the pitch as a result of the tactics that they're playing, haven't they? You've got to think, okay, say Diaz is going into a number 10 position or coming in central. Do I go with him or does someone else pick him up now? And these are all decisions that you've got to kind of make there and then very quickly. And the speed of the game at that level, at Premier League level, is just insane. I think we take it for granted because we watch it so often. But it really is so fast. So to be doing that, it can just cause hesitations that can basically be punished. And I think Liverpool done obviously a really good job of that, highlighted by the dominance in the game.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons Liverpool were able to dominate was because of Joel Matip. I actually sent out a newsletter before the match. Those who have signed up will already be aware of this, but I sent out a newsletter on
I've
Leeds.
signed up, mate, and I read it.
Did you? Good.
Yeah.
But I specifically flagged Matip, pointed out his progressive carries, and I'm going to actually quote myself here. I think I said, if you want to leave Matip as a free man, he'll just run through your formation. And that's kind of what he did. He's threatened to do it a number of times, of course, but this is the time it actually paid off. It actually worked for him. He ended up scoring a goal. And I think when you're facing Leeds, obviously they tend to man mark all over the pitch, but they have to leave one or two men free at times because otherwise it looks a bit daft. And often those players are the centre halves. So, if you've got centre halves against Leeds who are really comfortable on the ball, like Matip, you can really cause issues. I think a few days earlier they faced Manchester United, and Victor Lindelof did a similar thing. Just ran off the pitch, and if you've got centre halves that can do that, you can cause problems for Leeds. So I didn't think Matip would score, but I thought he'd offer similar to what he offered in the away leg earlier in the season, where he kind of played the assist before the assist, if you like. But he's a really unique centre half, Dave.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's very good at that. He's probably one of the best central defenders you could have in terms of playing that role. Stepping out, running through, because he tends to do it against really good. Or sorry, let me reframe. Better organised teams who maybe don't have this same approach. But if you could handpick a team in the division for him to play and play that kind of game, Leeds would be absolutely perfect for them. So I must admit, I did find it quite fitting that he scored. Because he has been doing those runs all season. And as I said, if you're going to pick a team for him to play and play in such a way, then it would have been Leeds. So quite fitting that he got a goal. Just quickly, Josh, I know we want to keep it on the more Liverpool side of things than Leeds, but just generally, do you think Leeds might go down this year?
I am getting more and more worried about them, but I don't think it's specifically their fault almost. Like Klopp pointed out in the press conference that, when you've got, I think it's Cooper, Phillips and Bamford out, that is your spine. And we saw Liverpool's issues last season without their spine at times. So I hope they stay up because I do like them. But if they're going to consistently be without those players for the rest of the season, for the most part at least, I do think they're going to find it tricky. But I'm sure from an Everton perspective, you hope that he continues to struggle probably.
I mean, yeah, of course, but I'll try and keep it purely without that emotion involved. And I mean, I can't believe how many goals they've conceded. They've averaged 2.24 per game conceded, 56 more than any other side. And obviously, come on.
I was going to say one interesting development on the back of last night is Liverpool have now scored more goals than they scored in the whole of last season. And Leeds have now conceded more goals than they conceded in the whole of last season.
I mean, Liverpool one's very interesting, but kind of ties in with the issues that they had, doesn't it? I suppose that we talked about at the time. And Leeds, I mean, it is bad for Leeds on that point. 6 against Liverpool, 4 against United, 3 against Everton, 3 against Villa. That's just the last 4 games. They've conceded 4 against Arsenal, 7 against City, 3 against Chelsea, another 3 against Liverpool early in the year, another 5 against United. They have been battered by quite a few teams. How are they look? Seeing the table, they're 3 points clear, but they've played 2 more games than Burnley. Which that could bite them now.
Yeah, I mean it is an insistent one to follow.
From the comfort of the top of the league.
Yeah. But when you usually see these 6-0 wins, very rarely is it a deserving 6-0. Usually it's a case of players have finished to a high level, and we can usually look at that using expected goals. But the expected goals on the day, mate, the Leeds have got absolutely hammered. So the expected goals on the day, have you seen it?
Yeah, I knew it. Well, it depends what model. I've seen a mixture between 4 and 5.
According to StatsBomb, which in my opinion have the best model, Liverpool posted an XG of bang on 5, and Leeds posted an XG of 0.1. That is just total dominance. I mean, there's 2 penalties in there, of course, but that's the highest Liverpool have posted all season, and it's not even close, really. The second highest that Liverpool have posted was 4.3 in the 4-0 win against Arsenal. So don't get me wrong, Liverpool obviously got help from 2 penalties here, but to post an XG of 5, yeah, I mean, you've actually guaranteed to win the game. Liverpool scored 6, so a little bit of an overperformance there, but I doubt Liverpool will have posted higher than 5 under Klopp in the Premier League.
Yeah, maybe we'll check it out. But it's even if you traded the 0.75s roughly for the penalties and make them something a bit more reduced, you're still looking at upwards of 3.5, aren't you? There for the home game, which I think in that territory can be anything. It can be 6 or 7 quite easily. And obviously, when you've got forwards like Liverpool, it can be more often than not. So I'm not surprised that it ended up being 6-0. Probably could have been more on another day.
Yeah, it was an interesting match. Liverpool have now closed the gap to Manchester City to just 3 points. I mean, where do we stand on this now? What are you thinking?
Good question. Because it's so bizarre because when we obviously spoke and alluded to it earlier, when we spoke about this, say 8 weeks ago, it looked as if City were unstoppable and Liverpool were maybe a little fragile. And now, if you're making that case for a team looking unstoppable and one looking a bit more fragile, you'd say it was role reverse. Liverpool looking that kind of form where they just seem they can go to anywhere and beat anyone in the division. And, we saw against Inter Milan even abroad. Whereas City, you now start thinking, well, they're going to be a bit fragile. Obviously, they got, for those who don't know, play Everton away this weekend, which will be interesting because obviously Everton's record isn't great against City, but Everton desperately need points. So there's going to be a lot of motivation.
Do you have any hope for that out of interest?
Not really.
I haven't actually seen Lampard's Everton yet, I don't think.
Yeah, no. I don't know. At home, Everton have been really good. So they played 4 games, won both home games convincingly, but looked at pretty poor on the road, which I think ties in a lot with the mentality of the players. So you think, what City champions coming to the Goodison, you don't expect much. That being said, everyone will remember the game that sealed the title for Liverpool in 2020. That was Chelsea, Frank Lampard's Chelsea beating City 2-1. I think he got spot on tactically in that game. I wonder if he'll have a similar approach, maybe going reverting to kind of 3-man midfield, compacting the midfield, making it a little bit difficult for key players to get on in the middle, and then just trying to be a threat on the break. Everton have got Decore back, Gray, so you got a little bit more pace on the break. You just don't know. I think the home crowd's been really good last couple of weeks with Lampard in charge. Everyone in the ground will be desperate for an Everton win, which, if we're being honest, Josh, probably hasn't been the case in these clashes in the past against City, when both Liverpool and City have been going for the league. Because Everton have, a lot of the time, been meandering around, mid-table, somewhere top half, not much to play for. They've probably not been that bothered if the result doesn't go their way, but I think it'll be different this time. So to answer your question, I think it'll be tough because City are very good, but I think there'll be a lot of motivation in the ground to win, and you'll know as well. Goodison, when it's on point, can be a fairly tough place to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at City's fixtures now, and I actually think their next 7 Premier League games I actually think are quite hard, and I do expect them. Well, I think they almost need to drop points. I think Liverpool have to have a lead in the Premier League probably by that point after them 7 games. The 7 games I'm talking about are Everton away, then Manchester United at home. We know United tend to do fairly well against City sometimes. I can't really put my finger on why. Then Palace away, I make Palace as a side. Brighton at home, I think Brighton are very well coached. Then Burnley away, probably the easiest out of the 7 that I'm talking about, but Turf Moor's never a nice place to go, is it? And they're fighting for relegation, so yeah, fighting for the live and stuff. So then they've got Liverpool, and then they've got Wolves away. I think Wolves are very well coached. But then after that, their remaining 5 games of the season are Watford, Leeds, Newcastle, West Ham, Villa. So I think by that point, by the time City have faced Leeds, I think Liverpool probably need a slight lead in the title race to get over the line at the end, because I think City will probably do all right in the last few games of the season. But the next 7, I do think, look quite tricky. If you look at the...
Yeah, I was going to say, I did have a look at it, and I did like a bit of a forecasted difficulty based on where these teams are expected to finish. But the only thing I would say with that is Liverpool's is equally as tricky, certainly in the next 5 going into the Etihad fixture. Have you had a proper look yet, Josh?
No, I'm just looking at Cities at the minute.
All right, well, Liverpool have got obviously West Ham at home, I think it is. Then Brighton away, Arsenal away, then United at home, and then Watford before the Etihad game. So you think West Ham, never easy, although even though you'd back Liverpool to win that one. Brighton, we've just said, can be a tough one. Arsenal away is quite a tricky game, I think. I don't know how you feel about that one.
No, I agree. Couldn't Arsenal look like they know what they're doing, and they've obviously got the top 4 to chase for there.
Yeah, United, I think Liverpool will beat United. Kind of indication of where they're at, and then Watford should win that. But the point I'm trying to make is I think it's so hard to predict what's going to happen going into that Etihad game.
You know what I've just realised as well? Absolute massive narrative here on the line. City's last game of the season is against Steven Gerrard.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah.
Come on, you can't write this. Do you reckon that's written?
It could be if it goes down to the final game.
That's insane, that.
Yeah, obviously he's still, he'll be so bitter about what happened in the 2014. Was it 2014? Yeah, that is an interesting one, man. Very interesting, in fact.
Yeah, very. It is at the Etihad, sadly, but I mean, that would be the equivalent of Gerrard lifting the Premier League trophy, in my opinion, if we can get it over the line there.
Yeah, it'd be happy with that. So, if you had to predict it now, are you now predicting it's going to be something that it goes to the wire?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think it certainly could. Both teams are comfortably the best in the league to the extent that they could easily win all of their remaining games except the head-to-head at the Etihad.
Yeah,
I don't think they will win all remaining games. I don't think these two are maybe as perfect maybe as the teams from 2018-19 at the end of the season when they just kept winning. I think both teams will still drop points. I just don't know how many. But I think both will probably end up over 90, I think, in the 90s. In
Do you
terms of 5-3, go on.
sorry, mate. I just while we're still on, do you read much before you go on to that? Do you put much weight on the fact that this weekend it could be 6 points, and I don't know when the next game is, who plays first, but do you ever look at that from a psychological point of view and think that plays a part or not? Because just for context, obviously Liverpool aren't playing this weekend because they got the final, so it could potentially be 6 points clear, and I don't know who plays first in the next round of matches. Do you put much weight on that?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's not ideal. I think certainly if every single week the team that you're chasing plays first and can kind of keeps winning, you have to keep responding, and at no point are you kind of getting ahead or getting close or anything like that. So I don't think it's ideal. I'd much rather Liverpool play first and City have a game in hand maybe or whatever. But yeah, it's one of them. We've got to deal with it, I suppose, and try and get to a point whereby when we face them at the Etihad, we are close enough to leapfrog them if we win. I mean, that'll be an interesting one to preview when it comes around.
Yeah.
In terms of 538, people might be a little bit surprised that Liverpool only 28% to win the league. City still 72% on to win the league. But I'm not sure that model considers that both sides have to play each other still. And Liverpool have obviously the better goal difference. So if Liverpool did win, Liverpool would go first. So I personally have a little bit closer than that. I don't think I'd put Liverpool 28%. I'd probably put them a little bit higher. But I do think City's still firm favourites.
Goal difference is a big one, isn't it, if you think about it?
Yeah, well, people were speaking last night. You know, Liverpool need to start paying attention to this. I suppose when we were hitting Leeds for 6.
Yeah, because it's it's a four goal positive swing at the moment. You know, if you can add to that a little bit more, then that it might be settled on that.
Yeah, I always think you can tell the level of teams when you look at the goal difference. You know, and I think it is quite interesting that after 26 games, Liverpool have a better goal difference than Manchester City. Because at the end of the day, what goal difference is, it's your ability to score more goals than you concede at the end of the day, and usually that's the best team. Liverpool have scored more goals to have conceded to a higher level than Manchester City, and then you've got Chelsea, and then you've got Man United, and then you've got West Ham and Arsenal level. Obviously, Spurs have a few games in hand and stuff, but yeah, it's interesting. So unless you've got anything else to add on the title race day, we will move on to this weekend's Carabao Cup final.
Yeah, I just wanted to see what the gap was on Chelsea now, considering they were in and around it for a little while. But yeah, it's 10 points now, although they have got a game in hand. Not that I'm thinking they are at all in it. I was keen to see how big the gap has actually opened on them, because they looked legit at one point this season, Chelsea, to be fair, didn't they? But
you know what? They did look legit, right? And I definitely believed it. But in the numbers I've said all season, that there's a top 2, a number 3, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
Chelsea have been slightly separate from Liverpool and City in the numbers all season. So the way the table looks at the minute, where there's a top 2, a gap to 3rd, and then a gap to 4th, that is how the numbers have painted it since for most of the season, really. Next year we'll always come and get you.
Yeah, you cannot run forever. Although I cannot believe that I know they've had to play the game in, but I can't believe United are only 4 points behind Chelsea.
I know, it is crazy, isn't it?
How is that possible? Like, United look so poor. They feel like they've had this horrendous campaign. How are they only 4 points behind Chelsea? Like, the table blows my mind sometimes. I know it's so basic, but
I know people forget how long the season is. Honestly,
yeah,
like
it's
Arsenal, if Arsenal win both of their games in hand, Arsenal can go 2 points behind Chelsea.
what?
And at one point, Chelsea were the next title winners. And at
Yeah,
one point, Arteta was getting linked with the sack after losing his first 3 games without scoring a goal and conceding
yeah,
10, I think. So,
yeah. And that feels a lifetime ago. You forget it was only this season.
yeah, literally, the season is long, mate. Honestly, it's an absolute
Yeah.
marathon. But in the middle of the season, obviously, we have a nice Carabao Cup to win. First trophy of the season. And we are facing, obviously, Chelsea. So it feels like we're facing a bit of a different side than what we've faced earlier in the season, certainly at Anfield. I'm a bit more confident than I was back then. I thought they were, real competitors back then, but now I do see Liverpool as a stronger team,
Yeah, I'd agree with
especially
that.
with everyone fit.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a few more chinks in the armour of Chelsea than maybe there was in that first meeting. Um, the obvious one, I guess, is you don't really know what's going on with the Lukaku stuff, which is I don't know. That
You
one's
got
been
thoughts on that one?
it's just been very strange. It looked like a solid move in the summer. He started really well, ironically, in the games we just talked. Well, the Arsenal game, he looked exactly like what we expected. A really kind of dominating forward. I think he scored in that game as well, didn't he? I'm
Yeah,
sure he did. Yeah. And okay, I haven't watched Chelsea every week, but since then, it didn't help he got injured, but he's just looked a little. It just hasn't seemed to fit at all, has it? It's been very bizarre, and a lot was made last week about the fact that he had something like 7 touches in the game, which is bad. But I wouldn't necessarily put that all down to him, because at the end of the day, he's meant to be a forward who's finishing moves rather than necessarily always helping and creating them. Although I do still think he has a role to do with that as well. So specifically on Lukaku, Josh, I am surprised. I thought he'd do well there, but Tuchel did kind of hint at it, didn't he? And it is true. For whatever reason, Chelsea just seems to have issues when they buy strikers. They just never seem to
yeah,
do that well in the market when they buy strikers.
yeah. I mean, we've been asked a few times in the past why don't Liverpool buy a striker? Klopp hasn't bought a striker yet and things like that. But I think Lukaku's 7 touches captures a reason as to why you maybe don't always want a striker, specifically in the modern game, and specifically when it comes to a team that wants to represent total football, essentially, which is what Liverpool are trying to do, where every player is a defender and every player is an attacker. When it comes to a striker, what a striker is essentially is the man at the top of the field who finishes your moves for you. That's what a striker is. A striker is the guy who puts the ball in the net. That's kind of it. So if you've got that player who's just waiting at one end of the pitch for the ball to finish your move for you, you can't. It does lead to it can lead to a bit of a disconnect. Tuchel, I actually like what Tuchel said after the game. He said the data speaks a certain language. He said, and the 7 touches shows that he was not involved in our game or something. He said, and then obviously the next game Havertz plays. Havertz is a lot more of a midfield type than Lukaku is, and the link was restored. So I do think generally strikers, specifically in these Klopp, Guardiola type teams, are just becoming a bit. I don't know. They have to be really, really, really good to be playing every week. And I think if you was to say to Tuchel now in the summer, you don't sign Lukaku, I think he'd actually take that now.
Yeah, but then the headache I think is, well, if Lukaku isn't good enough to be a striker, then who is? Because he was a forward at the height of his game. In terms of a striker profile, maybe Haaland, Lewandowski. But who else really is considered in terms of that number 9? Who else was considered better? So are we now saying that there's just no place for that kind of player anymore?
Well, I think with Lukaku though, I think compared to say a Harry Kane or someone like that, I think Lukaku's a lot less suited to a possession game than I think Lukaku's. I don't think it's been said enough that he is such a transition player, despite his target man appearance, if you like. He's a player who's always thrived on the break. He's always been, he thrived under Antonio Conte doing that. He was able to play in that way for West Brom and for Everton and teams like that. But since he's been put in a possession-based team, Everton's very slow. Everton's very methodical. He's constantly surrounded by players. Doesn't really get many opportunities on the break. He's just stood there waiting type thing, and it doesn't really seem to work. So I don't want to put all strikers in a specific box, but I do think strikers like Lukaku, they're not possession-based strikers. And I think some others are. I don't think it's a coincidence that Guardiola was linked with Kane in the summer, and he didn't get anyone on the back of it, on the back of not getting him. I think one of the reasons for that was because obviously Kane's very, very good, but Kane would have allowed City to keep playing the same way, really, because of how good he is in possession.
Do you think Lukaku's not very good technically?
No, it's not funny. He's not very good.
I'll reframe that because that sounds very harsh. In terms of the other players that we've spoken about there, where do you think he stands? Because every player at that level is fantastic technically, but...
So who are we talking about then? Lewandowski?
Say Lewandowski, Kane. Who else did we talk about? So I can't remember. Say those two. Where would you rank his technical ability?
Third.
Yeah.
I don't think he's bad technically, but I don't think he's a possession-based player. I don't think he's, absolutely the sharpest. Where like there's certain players who get on the ball, and a lot of them play for City, and you don't even challenge them because you just know they'll make a fool out of you. The ball's so glued to the foot that they will just escape. I don't think Lukaku's one of them. I think you can influence his first touch and things like that. But again, I don't want to downplay him because he's a ridiculous striker, had a brilliant career and things like that. But I just think when it comes to how Chelsea have played under the Tuchel, long possession sequences and things like that, yeah, I think I'm not sure he was suited, and I don't know if he will start this weekend. Would you start him?
Good question. I don't know. I thought Havertz done really well against Lille, and he's done that role quite well a few times. Even going back to his days for Leverkusen.
I actually think.
Go on.
I probably would, and the reason I probably would is because I've just been talking there about how he's a bit of a transition player.
Yeah.
And you can play like that against Liverpool.
But that'll probably be the best way, won't it? They're not going to dominate. Yeah, they're not going to dominate. I think he'll add some physicality up there, which it could be an ideal kind of game for him to come back. I say come back, he hasn't gone anywhere, but you know what I mean? Kind of, if he plays that game, plays well, scores a goal, scores 2, Chelsea win, then I think he's right back where he wants to be in the eyes of Chelsea fans and the squad. So maybe this is the ideal game for him.
Yeah, and do you think that because of his skill set, maybe you start Kanate over Matip? Because in certain games, Klopp has started Kanate when I think he's wanted real 1v1 skills. Like Kanate's quicker than Matip, he's stronger than Matip. He's not as good on the ball as Matip, but he's still decent on the ball. So I think considering what Lukaku's like, Kanate might be in line for the start, but I'm not sure.
No, yeah, I think you're right. There was a game. I'm trying to think. Maybe it might have been Palace away. I can't remember what score it finished, but I think Matip, I'm sure, played in that game, and I remember thinking specifically in that one when he was up against a little bit more in terms of pace up top and things, that potentially Kanate would have been a better option there. And I still think that now. I think I think he'd probably do a better job in terms of a physical battle. I think he'd nullify any threat in terms of pacing behind as well. I think he'd just be the better option, and that's no slant on Matip because we've just been talking about how good he was and how influential he was in this Leeds fixture yesterday. But I think specifically for this opponent, I Canate would be the ideal centre back. I think, or the best option to partner Van Dijk.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Liverpool benefit from their midfield this time around, because obviously last time we faced Chelsea was at Stamford Bridge, and we touched on it at the time. Liverpool played with a midfield three of Fabinho, Henderson and Milner. And I think Henderson and Milner in particular posted really low pass completions, which isn't always a massive thing, but I think on the day it did offer an insight into how chaotic they kind of became, and I think they lacked a bit of a cool head in the middle of the park. This time around, Liverpool will have Thiago in there, and Liverpool's record with Thiago on the pitch alongside Fabinho is ridiculous. So I think Liverpool this time around are obviously a lot stronger, and specifically in the final, they will really benefit from that control in the middle of the field.
Yeah, Thiago had that unbelievable game, didn't he? I think it might have been one of his first at Stamford Bridge when they went down to 10, and he just
was his debut that year.
Yeah, he just completely dominated. I know they only had 10, but it was just a complete kind of masterclass in that area. And yeah, it feels like 12 months ago there was a lot of talk about him just not being right for this Liverpool side, wasn't there? Admittedly, not much on this show. I think the only thing we really flagged as a big negative was he seems to be a little bit sloppy in terms of fouls, but we try to go into that a little bit more on a deeper level as to why. But I think he's made about 50 appearances now, and he's probably solidified himself as not take Fabinho out because of where he plays, but probably what Liverpool's best midfielder now in terms of those 8 positions for sure. And what he brings is just completely what Liverpool haven't had in the past, and the move now. I think everybody understands why Klopp and Liverpool made the move when they did last summer to bring that kind of profile in.
Yeah, I mean, for me, he's quite obvious when he's on the pitch. At least for me, he's quite clearly more valuable than Wijnaldum was. But if you look at the final in isolation, it is a serious midfield department, really. It could be a case of Fabinho, Thiago, Kovacic, Kante, and probably Henderson as well. So that's a lot of competition in the middle of the park. Maybe Tuchel will go for the midfield three, at the expense of one attacker. But it's going to be interesting. So, with it being a final, mate, for the first time in 2022, I'm going to ask you for your prediction on this one.
Yeah, fine. Before I give you a prediction, actually, I want to get your insight on it. Well, not insight, just want to ask you the question, maybe more from a fan perspective. This final League Cup, is it kind of in a strange way, despite it being considered maybe a little bit more inferior to the other ones? Is it just a bit more enjoyable because there's not as much pressure on it? Like if you win it, it's nice to win it, but if you lose it, it's not really a season ender. It doesn't feel like it's going to derail anything. It'll just be a little bit disappointing, but you move on.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think there's an element of that about it. I don't feel like a bag of nerves going into it. It doesn't feel like the season rests on it. It feels like we can still win loads of big stuff on the back of this. So yeah, I think you're right there. And, it's going to be nice because I think it's a real indicator. It's a real milestone, I think, for Liverpool's time under Klopp, because I don't think it's the biggest trophy, obviously, but I think it's the first real indicator of what Klopp's Liverpool looks like with depth. It's the first time we've had real depth, 2 players in every position in a way. And, on the back of that, we reached the final of the first trophy that we've been able to compete in. So I think it's an indicator of what could be to come if Klopp is now going to work with depth moving forward. Maybe Liverpool can start to clean up a little bit like Man City have in the past.
Yeah, agreed. In terms of prediction, such a boring scoreline. I apologise, but this is what I fancy. I think I fancy Liverpool to win 2-1 within 90 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say 2-1 myself, but I wouldn't rule out extra time. If I'm honest, I don't think you'd ever count with two two sides like this, and I think Chelsea are particularly, defensive orientated more than anything.
Do you still anticipate it being a fairly tight game? Because I do. Maybe one that Liverpool edge, but it's still being fairly tight.
Yeah, I think it'll be very, very tactical, and I think Chelsea will be really. In fact, to be honest, it's difficult with this one because Liverpool got the best attack in Europe, in my opinion, at the minute. But I think Chelsea's defence, when they really want to be on it, they're really hard to break down. And Liverpool faced 10 men of Chelsea earlier in the season at Anfield and couldn't get through. So maybe expecting Liverpool to score 2 is a bit daft, but I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But two top sides, and it's going to be a tight one, I think.
Definitely.
So, Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Enjoy the final.
Yeah, I will. I'll try to. And we'll be back next week. Well, I think I will. I think Dave's off now.
Yeah. I'm going stateside actually. So if anyone sees me walking around New York, give me a wave.
Yeah. Speaking of that, anyone seen us walking around? I thought I'd give a flag to. I got stopped the other day by a listener of the show. So anyone who ever gets the opportunity to do that, do it because it's nice to hear from listeners. So thanks for that one. But yeah, Dave, thanks for joining us, mate. And we'll be back next week to hopefully speak about Liverpool being winners of the Carabao Cup. So yeah, see you then, and thanks for tuning in.